There is a specific kind of human experience that has no clean name. The period between when something starts ending and when it actually ends. The last weeks of a job you've already resigned from. The months after a diagnosis, when life continues, but everything feels slightly translated. The strange normalcy that exists inside an ending that hasn't finished yet. We assume that experience requires self-awareness, that you have to know something is ending to live inside that particular strangeness. But 66 million years ago, something was ending for 2.5 million years before it finished. The asteroid was the final punctuation. But the sentence had been getting harder to read for a long time before that. The question nobody thinks to ask is what was happening inside that sentence. What were the dinosaurs actually doing, behaviorally, biologically, ecologically, while their world was slowly becoming something they weren't built for? The obvious picture of dinosaur extinction is a single catastrophic event. Asteroid hits, everything dies, story over. That version is clean, dramatic, and mostly wrong. The real question isn't what happened on the day the asteroid hit. That part, for most species, was fast. The better question is what the 2.5 million years before it looked like the long Cretaceous decline that paleontologists have been piecing together for decades. Because during that period, dinosaur species were already disappearing, ranges were contracting, diversity was collapsing in ways that had nothing to do with an asteroid and everything to do with a world that was quietly changing around them. What were they doing while that was happening? The answer is stranger and more familiar than most people expect. In 2016, a team led by paleontologist Manabu Sakamoto at the University of Reading published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences analyzing speciation and extinction rates across major dinosaur groups in the final 50 million years of the Cretaceous. Their finding was striking. Dinosaurs had been going extinct faster than new species were appearing for at least 24 million years before the asteroid hit. This wasn't happening evenly. Herbivores, particularly the large ornithischians, the ceratopsians and hadrosaurs that dominated the late Cretaceous landscape, were losing diversity fastest. The plant eaters were disappearing before the predators that depended on them, a collapse working its way up the food chain from the bottom. The predators were the last to feel it, but they were already feeling it. What was causing the decline? A combination of factors that sound eerily familiar. Volcanic activity in what is now India, the Deccan Traps eruptions, was gradually changing atmospheric chemistry and global temperature. Sea levels were shifting, fragmenting habitats that had once been continuous. The stable, warm, wet world that dinosaurs had evolved for over 165 million years was becoming variable in ways that favored smaller, more adaptable animals. The dinosaurs weren't failing. The world was changing faster than they could follow. Start with what the fossil record shows about behavior in the late Cretaceous. As diversity declined, something interesting happened to the species that remained. They became more specialized, not less. Ceratopsian horns became more elaborate. Hadrosaur crests became more varied and acoustically complex. Animals under ecological pressure were doubling down on the traits that defined them. The communication systems, the display structures, the social signals that had worked for millions of years. This is a pattern that modern ecologists recognize. When a habitat fragments and populations become isolated, the animals within each fragment don't simplify. They differentiate. They develop more elaborate social behaviors, more specific dietary preferences, more complex intraspecies communication. The world getting smaller didn't make the dinosaurs less interesting. It made them, in some ways, more... Now think about range contraction. The fossil record from the final few million years of the Cretaceous shows dinosaur populations pulling back toward the equatorial regions where conditions remained most stable. Animals that had once ranged across entire continents were becoming concentrated in the places that still worked. Not fleeing there was nowhere to flee to, just persisting in the pockets where persistence was still possible. But here's what's really interesting. There is evidence. In the bone beds of the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, one of the most intensively studied late Cretaceous sites in the world of continued, complex social behavior right up to the end. Triceratops individuals found in close proximity. Juvenile and adult hadrosaurs mixed in patterns consistent with group living. Predator and prey fossils interleaved in ways that suggest a functioning, dynamic ecosystem, not a dying one. The last dinosaur communities weren't collapsing in slow motion. They were living. The same way every generation of every species has always lived with no particular awareness that their version of the world was the last one. Nesting, migrating, competing for mates, raising young, doing the things that 165 million years of evolution had shaped them to do in a world that was quietly, incrementally, running out of room for them. But here's the thing. The story of what dinosaurs did while they were dying out is not really a story about dinosaurs. Every species that has ever gone extinct continued living right up until it couldn't. The passenger pigeon didn't know it was the last flock. The woolly mammoth didn't know it was among the last of its kind. The last individual of any species goes about its day the same way the first one did, finding food, avoiding danger, responding to the world as it is, not as it's about to become. There is something worth sitting with in that. The complete absence of a final chapter from the inside. The fact that ending, for every living thing except one species, is something that happens to them rather than something they experience. We are the only animals who know we are going to die. We are the only animals who live inside the knowledge of our own ending. The dinosaurs didn't have that weight, and it is genuinely unclear whether that was a loss or a mercy. Somewhere in Montana, 66 million years ago, a hadrosaur woke up on what would turn out to be one of the last mornings of its species. It didn't know that. It knew the temperature, the smell of the vegetation, whether the rest of the group was nearby. It did what it had always done, what its parents had done, and their parents before them, back through 165 million years of mornings just like this one. The asteroid was still 24 hours away, or a week, or a month. The exact timing doesn't matter. What matters is that it was just another morning, right up until it wasn't.